Destiny 2 is in a very vulnerable state currently. We've just finished the main storyline, the Light and Darkness saga, which has driven the game since Destiny 1's release really, and we are between the next saga, which is meant to come with the next expansion next year, and supposedly that's also continuing in Destiny 2. Currently we are in the second act of the second episode of 3 episodes. During this time, Destiny needs to be as good as it possibly can be to keep players around between the 2 major sagas, because currently there's no overarching story that Bungie can fall back on to say, oh, stick around to see the conclusion of this, even if an episode is quite bad and flops. We've seen in previous years that if a season flops, engagement might be worse, but people will come back to see what the next expansion is, what the next season is and such, but because there's no overarching story anymore, people don't have that reason. And a lot of people did drop off of Destiny with the final shape, because it was a good conclusion point. As we've seen for the past year at least, every update that we get to Destiny 2 breaks more and more things. There's more bugs being introduced. Even if the content itself is good, there's more and more bugs affecting the game. And the Dawning, which released this week, is a prime example of this, as it introduced well over the acceptable amount of bugs for a repeating seasonal event. This is not limited to, but includes the event card upgrade being free. This, as a side note, was handled very poorly, as they did disable the entire event for like 6 hours at least, I think it was, and their original stance was that anybody who'd managed to acquire it for free would have to purchase it if they wanted to keep it, and they then backtracked on this whenever they did fix it. However, I think this was a technical restraint, not a goodwill motive, which is a bit silly given that it's the Christmas event. There is also issues with multiple triumphs that they had to autocomplete. There is issues with triumphs autocompleting themselves from if you'd gilded the title from last year. There's issues with people's intro quests resetting upon giving Zavala a cookie. There's issues with people's recipes resetting if they start the Dawning on another character. There's issues with the Dawning quest resetting if you then start the quest on another character, and all this sort of stuff. There is an issue with weapon focusing for the Dawning weapons. There is issues with certain perks from Eve Levante not working. A slew of just horrendous bugs, which have essentially ruined the Dawning for this year. Half of them are fixed, half of them aren't fixed, and I don't think the remaining ones will get fixed. They did, however, add a cookie for Nimbus this year, about a year too late. This year's Dawning perfectly encapsulates Destiny's current state. Every update, every new piece of content, introduces more bugs than can justify its existence. How a seasonal event which comes around every year practically unchanged is in such a broken state is beyond me. Even one of the ingredient icons uses a placeholder icon this year. So community sentiment around Destiny 2 is pretty poor currently. This is where they should be the strongest, and they're currently the weakest they've ever been potentially. There was a developer update which got released this week from the assistant game director for Destiny 2, where he generally talks about how the next expansion is being worked on, giving you a bit of a tease for the future to keep you sort of going along in that fishing line hook, and how they'll be going quiet for communication and that for a while. But there's also a paragraph about breaking bones, which is basically changing things in Destiny. So they introduced a dungeon race for Vesper's Host, which was pretty well received, but then there's also the bad things, such as tonics in Revenant. There's also the removal of weapon crafting, which, funnily enough, in this update, isn't addressed as negative. It's only said that it has a rocky start. The line is, other changes have had a rocky start. Weapon crafting removed the joy of earning a random weapon, not feeling that any drop could matter, so we introduced enhanceable weapons. And that's the only mention of weapon crafting in this entire article. It was a rocky start for removing it. Weapon crafting was a quality of life update, if anything, because random rolls were so random and unpredictable it gave you a good path to getting the roll you actually wanted, and they removed it to give you back the need to random things. Yay. So that paragraph's quite big, but essentially nothing is seen as bad. Things are only seen as either rocky or good or both. Widening the focus is then the next big paragraph, where he essentially talks about how the focus for Revenant and Echoes have been quite small and restrained, such as Maya Sundaresh with her Echo of Command, such as Fikrul with his new power to raise scorn from living Elixni and the such, and how Heresy will deal with the Hive, Pantheon and all this sort of stuff, and will sort of close off the Light and Darkness saga, even though the final shape was advertised to have done that, so it feels like they're repeating themselves here. But it's seen as very positive. The one line which I have a major issue with is, by prioritizing satisfying conclusions, we want a clear path for bold new storylines in the saga to come. Everything that has been said in this article to do with episodes is how episodes should have been. That's not how episodes are, however. This one line is completely unreflective of the episodes currently. Echoes did not end with a satisfying conclusion, or any conclusion for that matter. There's no clear path. It does not clear up anything for a future storyline. It just leaves Maya Sundaresh in an exo form, floating down a river to at some stage come back and take control of Vorvex. In addition to that, Nessus has not changed outside of Echo's content. The patrol destination has not changed. Well, it changed for the start of the episode. It hasn't changed since then, which just seems like they've half-assed it essentially. After this paragraph, he then talks about heresy and how it's widening the focus to, the High Pantheon, and how it's going to be really good and it sets off the next expansion and stuff like that, and the next saga, and that's great and everything. But everything essentially that was said about episodes in this article was wrong. I don't have faith in Heresy being a good episode, and I don't have faith that Revenant will end with a satisfying conclusion, or a conclusion at all. The last jarring thing is that DMG, the main community manager, sort of that you see talking around every now and then, had put out a statement which had the exact opposite sentiment that this developer update had. In that he basically said that things have been rocky this week, especially with Dawning release, and that he is aware and the team are aware that they have to do a lot to regain our trust, and that they're in a rocky position, but they're going to work on it, that they're listening to our feedback and such. And everyone practically is saying in their responses that this has been heard time and time again. It's been heard repeatedly, especially from DMG. Not to do anything against him personally. He's, a community manager. But it's been heard many times from Bungie. And this is the worst state the game has been in, health-wise at least. Not necessarily content-wise, health-wise it is the worst it's ever been. I personally think that Bungie needs to suspend the game for about a season's length, let's say about 3 or 4 months, to just work on improving the health of the game. I think they need to take an entire season out to just repair the game, do bug fixes, do quality of life improvements, improve engine health, for example, and just get Destiny 2 to a state where it's healthy going forward. Because if Destiny 2 is the game they want to use to start off their next saga, and if they have no plans of building a Destiny 3 anytime soon, they need to improve the health of Destiny 2. Especially, this is the perfect time to do it, because we are between major story beats. We're between major sagas in the franchise, and instead of delaying the next one whenever it's up and running and we're going and we're trying to build momentum, it should be done during the lull. This is the perfect time to do it. And realistically, what they probably should have done is condense the episodes into a season's length instead of being 4 months long, be 3 months long, and then take one of the 3-month stints to do a health update. I do love Destiny, and I will continue to play it. However, I have to say, at this point, I'm playing it more to make videos on it, as opposed to playing it to play the game, because the game is not in a good state. I haven't even finished Act 2 for Revenant yet. Let me know your opinions in the comments, whether or not you think Destiny is as broken as I think Destiny is. What do you think they need to do in order to improve the health of the game, and even just to keep players around essentially, and what you would like to see from a health update, for example. But for now, that's it. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please consider leaving a like, maybe even subscribing, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye bye.